This is AM 650's The Law Show with Sterling Fox. Now back to the show.
Welcome back. Nice to have you with us this Sunday morning. In studio with us, our guests from Lindsay Kenny, LLP, Angela Thiel, and Christine Eilers. And we're talking family law, particularly today as it pertains to blended families. And Christine and Angela, you were both telling us in our opening segment about the challenges that face people, couples trying to put together blended families. And boy, oh boy, that's quite a laundry list. That's quite a task. Angela, aside from lawyers, professionals like yourselves, who else is out there to help couples who are desperately trying to get together and have some kind of life and bring all those kids along with them and hope it works out for everybody? It's a monumental assignment in some cases. What sort of help is available in addition to legal counsel?
Well, I always, as I have a lot of clients who over 30 years have gone through a divorce, and they've sometimes become friends, and now they're going into a new relationship.
Okay.
So I find that if I get a call 2 or 3 times from what is really a friend, and I'm not going to charge them for this, and they're saying this is happening and that's happening, I will say, there's some good counselors out there on how to make things work. And I have one friend in particular that from time to time she'll complain about something, and I'll say, do you want my advice as your friend or your lawyer? Or as another parent. Mm-hmm. And she hates that when I say that because she knows that means I don't agree with her position.
Right.
But and I found that some of the people that I send my clients to in those situations, they have much more expertise on, seeing the problems. There is a counseling group on the North Shore, for example, led by a woman named Allison Jones, very well known to all of us lawyers. She has a number of people working out of her office, and they're all very good at the problems with blended families. And often I will also say to people, if you have an employee assistance program at work, which are basically free counselors, many people have them. A lot of union members, lawyers have access to counseling services for themselves and their families. Start with those people because you don't get charged very much for them. They're an employee benefit. But if you don't have something like that, there are great private counselors out there. And if you're looking for a counselor and you go through I think there's a Counseling BC website.
Right, yeah.
You'll see people that say they specialize in the problems of blended families. Allison Jones is a name I can throw out there with all confidence that anybody in her office is well known to the court, well known to lawyers as being of assistance. And most of these issues can't be settled or litigated in terms of, we don't know how. We have different views of disciplining kids.
Sure.
We have different views of money with kids, allowances, what we pay for. I'm upset because my spouse's ex is asking for an awful lot of money for an extracurricular activity for his kid, and I just think that that's too indulgent. I think we've told you before that sex and money are the two issues that drive most marital disputes. Well, money being spent on one set of kids versus the other parent saying, no, I think my child should have to earn that. I don't think they should be just given a car. They should have to earn that.
Okay.
I've seen people say, well, we're in this house together and your children are here less often than my children because of different schedules, but you want to give your daughter the nicest room with the ensuite bathroom, and my daughter is in the smallest room. So, and you think about it, you think about managing a life with kids in an intact marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
Where you have brought up those kids together and you think you've got similar values on how to deal with your kids. Well, I've been doing that for 26 years, and I can tell you that we don't always agree. So how would I get along with, a new parent of my children who hadn't been, raising them with me together?
Sure.
Yeah, you got 4 opinions instead of 2.
Exactly.
So the assistance that is available to blended families or people contemplating that blending aspect of their lives. I mean, there's a myriad of legal issues to deal with, but as we've already identified in this conversation, those, generally speaking, aren't the biggest problems. It's managing to fit a whole new group of people under the same roof and get along kind of somehow.
Absolutely. I think it's a lot of the non-legal issues that are the real interesting thing here and the difficult thing to deal with. So, but there are also parenting coordinators. I mean, there's a lot of counseling is obviously available, but there's also parenting coordinators when there's sort of those quasi-legal decisions that need to be made.
And are they court-appointed individuals?
They can be court-appointed, or they can be retained by the parties themselves to help with decision-making when the parents just can't decide and they don't want to end up in court. So they'd rather have a neutral third party help them make the decision and ultimately make the decision if necessary.
We've had many discussions about prenup agreements, and you both know how incredibly unromantic I think they are, and you both don't care because you both recognize the value of such an agreement.
Yes.
Now, those I've always sort of presented them to you in the case of two individuals just coming together with no attachments. Now we've got two individuals, both of whom have children and other spouses and obligations and all this. Is a prenup going into a blended family relationship? I'd like to ask both of you this. Is it almost obligatory?
Well, it's going to be obligatory with respect to the estate issues because you, under the estate statute in British Columbia, you have a statutory obligation to provide it on death for your spouse and your children. But it's pretty common that you're going to buy a home together, for example. Are you going to buy that home together in joint tenancy so that if something happens to you or her that it goes just to one
the
of
other
you?
person, right?
You also have the problem that child and spousal support, once ordered by the court, is often ordered to what's called bind your estate. And what that means is that whatever you leave in terms of an estate has to be used to support children that you've left behind. So you can find yourself with those two legal problems. I've got an obligation to my wife. I've got an obligation to my own children.
Right.
And I better get some advice as to how to deal with it. And so often the marriage agreement and the will and sort of what's referred to as statutory declaration of here's what we've tried to do, and we're setting it out here in a legal document so that we don't get into litigation thereafter. And what happens is the reason you get into litigation is mother of dad's children and stepmom are fighting over dad's estate.
Right.
And because when I say mother of dad's children, they're still young. Mother is the litigation guardian. So you try to set those things out. But as Christine said, you can't contract out a child support. You can simply set out in your agreement what your obligations are to one another. What are you going to own together? And then hopefully that's going to be mirrored in your will and your estate planning document.
Christine, with with this agreement, this prenup, apply whether in fact you ever intend to get married or not. That's almost an irrelevant detail. It's the legal contract between the two parties that is so critical in the blended family arrangement.
Well, now, since the new law came in and property division applies equally to common law spouses as it does to married spouses, that's true. Most people now are doing a cohabitation agreement that will continue as a marriage agreement if the parties do eventually get married.
Gotcha. Okay.
Another thing just on what Angela was mentioning is that under estate law, the stepchildren don't have rights to challenge the estate of a step-parent. And so if the birth parent needs to protect anything they want to give to the kids, and doing a marriage agreement is a good way to do that so that the assets are protected for the children down the road and don't all pass to the step-parent, who the children have no rights to claim again.
Yeah, like it's really common for people in a simple will, they'll come in together and they'll say, well, I'm going to give everything to you. And you're going to give everything to me, but when you die, you'll divide it among our children.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize that a will like that is not binding at all. And so the minute one parent dies, the other parent can say, well, forget his kids, I'm changing my will.
Uh-huh.
And that gives rise to a lot of litigation. You can make that promise as you're discussing this within, your will planning seminar. You can make
And a marriage agreement.
And a marriage agreement. You can make that an enforceable contract that you need. If I give you this, you need to provide for my kids on your death. But you have to do it properly.
Can we talk about child support? And especially in a blended family, both parties, generally speaking, would be aware of the issue because they're both bringing children to a new relationship, and both of them are either paying for or receiving child support based on those kids. So both of them are coming into this new arrangement keenly aware of the need for child support. And so the obvious question is, when does this all end? And if you have a child support agreement based on a divorce, and now you're in a blended family, because you're in this new relationship with sharing income and a domicile with a new person, do the terms and conditions of your child support from the divorce, are they subject to change at all?
They can be if you have a shared custody arrangement where you've got a 40-60%, I've got the kids this amount of time. Child support is based on means, needs, and circumstances. So let's say you're making $25,000 a year, and you decide when you marry this new guy that you just as soon stay home, and maybe you're going to have a baby with him.
Okay.
The new spouse's income can be taken into consideration in determining whether on a set-off idea, whether the mother has more income to provide for child support. It's fairly complex. It shouldn't normally change, but it may change in a situation of a shared parenting regime.
Typically, it's based on the payor's earnings, and that's it.
Okay.
And so it's not going to consider that payor's spouse's earnings. But as Angela points out, there are circumstances where if somebody's intentionally underemployed, in a sense, because of their new spouse, then that might be taken into account.
But what if you get into one of these agreements now, you're in the blended family, and you mentioned this already, Angela. Some guy comes in and, oh, don't you worry about that, little lady. I got lots of dough. I'll take care of everything for you here. You want that in writing, don't you?
It doesn't do you any good to have it in writing because child support agreements are not enforceable. You can't write something down about child support and expect that the court will pay attention to it.
Okay.
So I guess
So how do you humor that kind of attitude?
The piece of advice I always give is the child support for your children is your responsibility to collect and to enforce, and never let that go because somebody else says, I'll take care of you.
Right.
Because it is really hard to to sort of 5 years later, 10 years later, say, oh, hey, you know what, our relationship's broken up and I'd like some child support from you now. Sometimes you don't even keep track of where that fellow is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in fact, with a step-parent, you have to apply within a year.
Within a year, but what I'm talking about is the dad you let off the hook, because Mr. Magnanimous said, I don't want him to have anything to do with our family, so let's not pursue him. Let's the file at family maintenance, let's just close it.
So some guys do that, eh?
All the time.
They come in and go, well, I don't want any of his money in my life because that'll give him too much power and sway. So let me just pick up the tab for everything, and then he's gone. That's the thinking, isn't it?
Well, I think what's fair to say is I'm not sure whether it's not so much they don't want the money, but they don't want his influence.
Right.
As I said, it's like dogs pissing on a tree. This is my woman now, and I'll take care of these kids, and I don't want him to be able to, have any input. And the woman, of course, to keep her marriage, her new marriage happy, she goes along with that, and then sometimes she finds to her detriment that it's 5 years later and he's going, sorry, dear, I'm washing my hands of you and you should go find, bio dad again.
Now, maybe it could go to spousal support to some extent.
Yeah.
But
and there's the issue of spousal support and what happens in a remarriage is that is litigation even more complex.
Well, we'll talk about that after the break, but it's interesting though that once again we've sort of hit a point where it's just you have to stop and sort of recap what we've done, and in terms of takeaway messages, no matter how unromantic the radio host thinks these prenup agreements are, do it, especially in a blended family. It's not the law. But and in fact, the new law is kind of more on your side than the law has ever been before, but that's no excuse for not nailing it down, not creating the agreement.
And not necessarily even putting it in an agreement, but getting the advice going in so you know what your obligations are.
Our guests are Angela Thiel and Christine Eilers from Lindsay Kenny, LLP, online at lklaw.ca. Back with more of The Law Show in just a few moments.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.